Welcome to another program here at Backstage Fest. Today, or this hour, we're going to be talking about Bridgerton, everyone's favorite show of 2020. We've got lots of people who were involved in the making of the show, so we're going to kind of just get right into it. My name's Elise Roth. I'm a senior editor here at Backstage, and I, of course, am a huge fan of the show, so I'm super excited to hear how you guys work to make it come together. So, I'm sure a lot of people who are joining right now, you can see the number slowly ticking up. People are fans of the show, but they might not know exactly what each of your roles are. And anyone who's watched the credits of pretty much anything that's ever been made for the screen knows that there are a ton of names and a ton of work and a ton of people who work together to make something great like Bridgerton. So for the viewers who are fans of the show, but maybe are less familiar with all the roles behind the scenes, I just want to have everyone kind of introduce what they do for the show and kind of what your work contributed to on the screen that we all saw in the final product. So I guess I'll just go in the order of how you're appearing on my screen. And also, can you say where you're calling in from? Because I know we have some around the globe situation going on right now. So I'll have Will, you can start.
Hi, I'm Will Hughes-Jones. I'm actually in London at the moment. I'm the production designer, and my job is to create the world of the setting of Bridgerton. So everything from the rooms to the sets to the locations, the props, the animals, the carriages, that's all my realm. So yeah, that's what I do.
I guess, Jeffrey, you'll be next.
I'm the director of photography, cinematographer on Bridgerton, and I'm responsible for the lighting of all the sets and locations and the photography, camera placement, camera choices, lenses, coverage, all of that.
And John and Ellen.
Speak, Ellen.
Oh, okay. I'm Ellen Mirojnick. I'm the costume designer for Bridgerton, and I'm responsible, along with John, for creating the world of Bridgerton through characters, through character design, through everything that all of our actors, principal and standbys, wear throughout the entire show. And I'm in Los Angeles.
And Kris, you're next.
I'm in New York.
I'm Kris Bowers. I'm the composer for Bridgerton. So I wrote the music that you hear in the show, or at least all of the music that's not recognizable. Any of the songs that you recognize, most of those were chosen by the music supervisor, Alex Patsavas. But any of the other pieces you hear are the main themes, or even the theme that Daphne plays on piano, that's me playing on piano, and that's my music. Yeah, thank you all. And I'm calling from LA.
And Marc, you're last.
Hi everyone, I'm Marc Pilcher. I was the hair and makeup designer for Bridgerton. Main cast, crowd, everything that you saw on screen was my vision. And I'm currently in Belfast in a very dark hotel room, so apologies if it looks so dark, but I didn't bring my ring light with me, so unfortunately I'm a bit shadowed.
No worries, we can see you fine for now. And so the next thing I wanted to ask was, there's something kind of for everyone in Bridgerton, which I think is one of the reasons why it was such a big hit. People who are fans of period pieces, people who are fans of romance, gossip. There just is so much people who are fans of Shonda Rhimes. So there's really something for everyone. And I'm curious what preparation went into each of your roles, because it's not, a straight period piece that's biographical, and obviously not everything had to be completely factual, but there were elements that were, and then there were elements that were more modern. So for each of you, how did that come together, and what did you what kind of references did you use when you were, you know, dreaming up what your part was going to be? I guess we'll go in the same order. We'll start with you, Will.
Okay. Well, I mean, when I met Kris and Shondaland, you know, the brief was very clear to me that we were doing a Regency piece, but not like anything had ever been seen before. So, you know, the look was to dial it up to the max. And it had to appeal to the modern audience. I had a lot of help in the beginning because Ellen had already been on the show for a while. So she had done her research and she had a very clear vision of the costumes, which gave me a very good head start in knowing what the background should look like. And so, you know, when I was looking initially, yes, I looked at some of the old films like Barry Lyndon and that sort of thing, but also looking at films like Marie Antoinette, you know, just something really punchy. And that was a sort of starting point. But really for me, it was about the brief. I was given a very clear brief by Kris and Shondaland. And I think that as we went around locations, it came clear to us that we needed to build. There was always a conversation about building the Bridgerton world. But when we started looking at locations, it became very clear that actually we needed to really build it to give ourselves that color and that vibrancy that would have been around at that period. But obviously the houses are 200 years old now, so that color has faded. So that was our starting point to get to the point that we are at now.
And Jeff, you're next.
For me, it was about trying to modernize and sort of bring to life and make something contemporary that had been seen many times before in plenty of beautiful period films. Barry Lyndon, certainly. We were in a location actually that shot quite a bit of Barry Lyndon, which was kind of surprising. So we felt it was good for us if it was good for Stanley Kubrick, but also to make it, to humanize it and make it sort of authentic for the contemporary audience, not to have it be just this sort of precious period piece that you observe from afar, but something that you can live in. It was certainly a big part of the visual design. We wanted to create these sort of tableaus, but we also wanted to get into the story and have these characters be alive for us. So those two things were key for me.
And Ellen and John?
Well, we started actually with a brief exactly from Kris. And I had been with Shondaland before, and it was really clear what they were after in terms of creating this world. And it was very, very exciting because we could work in 1813, but we had the challenge and the ability to elevate that and not make it an historical precious piece. We had the ability to do quite a lot of research and lay a foundation of what was real. But knowing what is real, you then can abstract totally. And so we created a lookbook that shifted the palette of what 1813 was about to a bit of a more modern sensibility. We shifted fabrics and we shifted silhouettes and looked to different decades to see what we could incorporate into our world that would just shift the silhouette enough to be an adaptation, because we were in a bonnetless universe. That was the first and foremost. You know, most Regency pieces will have bonnets, and what we did with bonnets was just make them small little hair pieces. It was without a question a top note of the brief: no bonnets, a bonnet universe, and not a history lesson. So we had great freedom in looking at many, many different things and combining elements that one never has the opportunity to combine.
And Kris, I already see a bunch of questions about where the contemporary songs that are instrumental came in, but can you talk a little bit more about, you know, the job in total, I guess, including that aspect of it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so similarly, my starting point, you know, was with a discussion with Kris and Betsy, just explaining similarly how this was not going to be a traditional Regency period piece, and they wanted the music to reflect that. And so we had a bit of trial and error where at first I tried taking classical little vignettes that I wrote and then kind of chopping and screwing them and messing with them as if they were like samples and trying to make really modern beats with them. And that really didn't work. And then we tried going really traditional and writing something that was really grounded in that era. And that also felt a little too stuffy. And the thing that really unlocked it for me, there were two aspects. One, we had to come up with that piano piece that grew into Simon and Daphne's theme in pre-production because they needed to shoot to it. And so when we were working on that piece, Kris sent me a couple of piano pieces by Ravel. And I hadn't really been considering Ravel since, just period-wise, it's like kind of in between. It's not that period and it's not now. And so I wasn't even thinking in that world. And he was so taken by that sound that once we found a theme and melody that felt really right for Simon and Daphne, that opened up that whole sound to me as far as having this more romantic, impressionistic sound. And also that felt like it really made sense with this love story and all of those aspects of it. And then the second thing that really unlocked it were these songs. I remember we had our first spotting session and Alex Patsavas had already started pulling some of these covers by groups like Vitamin String Quartet or Duomo or any of those artists. And hearing a song like Thank You Next in the context of a ball scene immediately helped me empathize with these characters and understand where these women were just with my own relationship with that song, or my wife's relationship with that song, or my mother-in-law's relationship with that song. And so thinking of that, I started to then look at pop music to see if I could similarly find rhythms and like ways to orchestrate the orchestra, but think of each of those sections as a part of the band in like a pop setting as opposed to the more orchestral setting, while also trying to write thematically and harmonically and melodically in this more romantic kind of way. And so I feel like those two things really helped me find a spot. And then as far as the songs, I mean, that's just Alex Patsavas. I mean, she's just a legend when it comes to that. She's been doing that for Shondaland since the beginning and has been known for really creating an identity for a show musically with the songs that she chooses, even if it's only a couple per episode. For most of those were just songs that she found, you know, she had a huge bin of covers that they chose from and found ones that worked the best. And the one time that we collaborated was in the I Burn For You episode. At the end of that episode, the song Strange was one where they didn't have a cover for it, but they knew that song was something that Kris really responded to and felt really excited by. And so Alex asked if I would arrange it. And with that, it was just trying to capture the feeling of the song. And so much of that is the cellist. A friend of mine named Hillary Smith plays the cello and the melody on there. And that's really what makes that all feel as emotional as it does. But yeah, all those covers were Alex Patsavas. Yeah.
And before we move to Marc, I'm curious because you mentioned that you are on the post-production aspect of it as the person adding in the music to what's already been filmed. Were you able to start work before filming started? Like, did you, based on the materials that you had, or did you really have to wait until, you know, you had those scenes in so that you could see what music felt right?
Yeah, I really had to wait. I mean, I worked on that piano piece for Daphne and Simon pretty early on. But even by the time I worked on that, I did see a couple of ball scenes. Those trial and error periods that we had were to a couple of the ball scenes that they shot early on. And then outside of that, I didn't have anything but the scripts. So their theme was really based on my understanding of their relationship based on the page, essentially. And at that point, especially since anything that I was trying against those ball scenes was not really working, I kind of wanted to wait until I saw a bit more and got a bit better feel for the world. And so, yeah, once I really got into it, we already had the full episodes to be able to watch and respond to.
Makes sense. And then finally, Marc, when it came to planning your designs for the series, we've heard Will, we've heard Ellen and John and how, you know, those visual aspects came together. So what were your references and how did you plan for the hair and makeup?
So, I mean, I came to the job quite late. I think I was the last person to be booked. Obviously, Ellen and John and Will had been on the production for quite a long time. I always like to read the script, you know, two or three times, and by the third or fourth time, I like to start to decide how I can convey the personalities of each character through the hair and makeup to tell a journey, just from ideas, not just from books or paintings from the time, but also my knowledge of films. I grew up watching Hollywood movies and musicals, and how to interject those kind of just, you know, elements from things like that into it. And then obviously working with John and Ellen and John, you know, I started to obviously see the routes that they were going down with, you know, the sort of some of the 1950s Dior looks. And, you know, and if I had just done a normal Regency period hairdo with, you know, Lady Featherington's, you know, amazing bold floral prints and those amazing, you know, Dior necklines, it would have looked really strange. So I, you know, you have to enhance that and just add. So I just decided to get with her, particularly to go for a kind of Elizabeth Taylor kind of look, you know, still keeping in with the silhouettes of the period, but just adding those little elements. And also I think because with Bridgerton, you know, I have so many friends who say, you know, we never watch period pieces, period series, but we love Bridgerton. And, you know, we were aiming for a totally different audience of people who, you know, I mean, obviously I have friends who watch period things all the time and loved it too, but, you know, we were opening it up to a totally different generation. And I think you have to constantly have that in mind when you're designing for it. So yeah, hopefully we managed that.
I think so. And sort of going off of that, I mean, Will mentioned, and you just mentioned, Mark, how, you know, you have to pay attention to what other departments are doing. Otherwise, the final product is not going to look great. So for anyone who wants to jump in, I'm curious how you work together when putting things together, whether it was pre-production or filming, and also who you're working with the most outside of your own department to make sure everything is coming together perfectly on screen.
I would say, I'll jump in. I would say with all these talented people before us, it's such a pleasure to work with a group that illuminate each other, frankly, and actually live and work on the same page. The book that we had created originally, John and I, the lookbook, I think said a lot. It said a lot in terms of the directions. We were the first to be hired, just because. And I think it said a lot in terms of what the tonality of the show we were hoping to create. And so when Will came aboard, and when we work with Will and we look at the fabrics and the colors and the tonality of the characters and such, he absolutely has the ingredients that he needs to then add to the feast. And Marc, of course, came, he brought his genius to finishing everything that we created. The dialogue is always open. We always are talking all the time, to be able to do something that we all are hoping it can be, bringing it to its, you know, highest possibility. But all of that would be naught without Jeff. If Jeffrey didn't capture it the way he captured this, we wouldn't be sitting here talking today. And that beauty, you know, it's kind of making this feast and coming to this party that you just want to bring the finest ingredients possible and really let everybody work to the highest degree that they can, which everybody on this panel I felt really honored to be part of. And I couldn't do my job without John. I mean, John Glaser is brilliant, and I don't know, kind of like you close your eyes and you try to remember and you go, oh, right. It just seems like a big blur at this moment in time, but I remember it to be quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that, as Ellen quite rightly said, when I started, there was a lookbook from the costume team. And for me, part of my brief as a production designer is it's not a matter of building sets that are saying, hello, here I am, because the audience are following a story and they need to, there is a character-based thing. So at every opportunity, you need to be pushing the characters forward. So there's no point in us designing sets that make the characters disappear into the wallpaper, as it were, for want of a better word. So having the references that Ellen and John had put together was a great start for me. And then on top of that, when I started to see what Marc was doing, that the pure sculptural quality of the wigs really gave me the impetus to, to be honest, go a bit crazy even more than what we were doing. Because, Bridgerton is, yes, it's seated in the Regency period, but it's a pastiche of the period. It's theatrical. It's going back to sort of those films like My Fair Lady. That's the world that we're living in. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I do. If Jeff doesn't shoot it properly, Jeff doesn't make it feel beautiful, then it's all for naught. So every day, Jeff and I would have all sorts of interesting conversations about this, that, and, you asked, who you work together most closely with on the show. And I think for me, making sure that when I'm designing sets and we're putting windows in the right places to be able to create beautiful lighting setups, that was a lot of conversation went into that quite early on with Jeff. And then as we went through, we were constantly having those conversations because, I would say that, myself and Ellen and Marc, we're the sous chefs that are getting all the products together with a recipe book from Shondaland, and we've all bunged it in the oven, but Jeff's the one standing beside the oven knowing when to pull it out. And, that's sort of,
well put.
Got to look after Jeff. That's what I'm saying.
Well put.
I can only screw it up, basically. All this beautiful work comes to me, and I have to make sure it's lit beautifully. Working with Will was amazing. Yes, we worked very close together and had a lot of conversations. And that's the best way for a cinematographer to come into a show and be able to help. Will designs the sets with lighting in mind. And that was so important to how it was going to look. And for me, it had to be very natural. It had to be beautiful. The whole thing was a bit of a fairy tale and almost a fable. So I felt, after seeing their designs and all this work that came to me, that we could take some chances, like Will said, and make it our own world. We honored the period, but we could take liberties, and that was the most fun.
Yeah,
I think that we always heightened the reality of whatever it was, whatever the tone of the episode was, whatever the tone of the characters, there was always a heightened reality that maybe did push it into a fairy tale fantasy, but it was all to be so luscious and inviting for an audience to just dive right into.
Yeah, and all that really came through. And of course, all of your wonderful work was surrounding the great work of the actors that appeared on screen. And so I also want to get an idea of how you all work with actors, and if you ever, it obviously sounds like a lot of the preparation work, there were things that were decided before filming began and before you were interacting with actors. But I am curious if the actors who ultimately ended up being cast to play these roles had an influence in then you changing any of the intended designs or adding something, or, you know, just influenced any of the work that we ended up seeing in the final product?
I think for Ellen and I'll speak for both of us. I don't think we enter, when we meet an actor, with any preconceived notions. We were lucky enough to have built a large library of clothes so we could try things on, take things off, find out what worked, find out what didn't, and then manufacture them for them. But every character that came in had an opinion. Ellen had an opinion. I had an opinion. The script had an opinion. You know, some of that is dictated from there. So we worked very, very close with each one. Just, you know, and we were talking about heightening things, and I was thinking, when we lost the bonnet from this period, it instantly meant that the hair was more important. It meant that how it was shot would be different than an 1813 piece. Even the interiors, because without bonnets, it makes it look a little more modern, not so period. And I think once we crossed that line, all of us were able to go a little further in our ideas.
The actors were very, very the actors were very, very curious and supportive of whatever our ideas were first. They didn't have an idea at all about what we were up till they walked in the room. And once they walked in the room and we talked about what Bridgerton was to become, they were like little children, no matter what age. They were really so inquisitive and open to all the changes or shifts or ideas that we wanted to, you know, bring across. Mark spoke of
being lifted.
Say again?
And the confinements being lifted from them.
Yes, yes, and that certain things would hold and certain things wouldn't. And discovering who they were became really a really great exercise for each and every one of them, because these wonderful actors really, really did walk in the room expecting a Jane Austen universe. And this was quite the opposite end. So we really gave them a playground, and we had the great luxury of working with actors that were totally open. And of course, Marc came in and added the magnificent sculptural ideas for the hair and the makeup that were just perfect. I mean, this doesn't happen that often, I have to say. It was just a blessing.
Oh, thank you. I just find for, you know, with the actors, it always helps them, you know, they've already formed in their mind as much as they can think about their character. And you can then just, you know, if you've, say for instance, characters like Eloise, you know, in my mind, I knew that in the Regency period, some people had very cropped hair, women, you know, they had these kind of mullet hairdos. And I just thought, because she's, you know, a feminist, a free-thinking girl, you know, I just thought, I'm going to suggest it to her and see if she thinks it. You know, she might just go, oh my God, no, or, you know, and be absolutely horrified. And she immediately was like, oh my God, I love it, you know. So then you had something to work with, and it helped her. It helped, you know, the fact that you've thought so much about their character and tried to add your ideas to it, to, you know, it makes them feel so much more secure. And then of course we had to convince the producers, you know, because that's the next thing. You have to sort of get you know, final approval. But yeah, and we had such great actors, just the loveliest cast ever. And you know, again, they were brilliant to work with. So we were kind of charmed on this job, really.
We were.
From my point, probably out of the group here, I probably have the least to do with the actors. But obviously when we talk about action props and you know, the things that their personal possessions, we always have a conversation with them about that. But what I found with our cast, generally they walked in without any preconceived ideas about what this was, in terms of, I think by the time they got to me, they'd obviously met Ellen and Marc, and they didn't quite, I don't think they quite knew what it was we were going to create in terms of the settings. So day one of the shoot, I remember just standing in the corner being very quiet and not really, because I didn't sort of make myself known to the actors at that point, and just hearing them going, oh wow, you know, sort of slightly jaw-dropping, because I think one of the first things we did was a ball, wasn't it? It was in Bath, and it was a beautiful room with chandeliers that were millions of pounds worth. And you could then just thought, okay, this is really quite something special. And as you know, Marc and Ellen and Jeff have already said, this doesn't happen every day, where there's a group of people that sort of lock into an idea and get it and run with it, and everybody has got this synergy. And I think that for me is the success of this show. And then when Kris did his most amazing work over the top. I mean, I have to say, Kris, I've never met you. It's a real pleasure to meet you on screen, because you know, your work is just off the chart. And when you put that over the top of it, you know, you've got something which, as I say, doesn't happen very often. So I feel very honored that we managed to pull this off, as it were.
And I'm curious if I know that it's hard to choose, but if you had for each of your individual crafts, do you have a favorite thing that we ended up seeing on screen, whether it's, you know, a piece of music or a costume or a set, or even just a shot for you, Jeff?
The scene, I think it was in the first episode, where there's a character that lights these, I think it was festoon lights that sort of go down an entire path. Will convinced me, Will knows everything about that era, that was a real thing, that really happened. And I was something that was going to be spectacular and beautiful, but I was like, is this really true? And sure enough, it is. And that effect was stunning to me. And that was an amazing thing. Obviously, we had to deal with a lot of candles, and we didn't have any electrical sources at the time, of course, but Will was able to bring in these elements of lighting that were so thrilling and so exciting. So that, when I saw that, I was just blown away. It was amazing. It was fun to shoot.
I have to think, I think that my favorite was that set as well, because mine was a different one. It's that, you know, I'm a kid at heart. So when you get the opportunity to do a fireworks display, you know, what's not to like? So the idea that I was allowed to create fireworks of that scale. And again, as Jeff quite rightly said, we researched this to the nth degree, because that location, it was written in the script that this lighting effect happened. And we all scratched our heads and thought, well, how can that be? Because there was no electricity. And what we've worked out, what we found out was that they used whale oil to do it. And it was a pyrotechnic which lit it all up. And we had lots of conversations about whether we were going to just do sort of 3 strands and then CGI the rest in. But when it came down to it, we just thought, no, let's go for it. So 2.5 kilometers later of lighting down this avenue, we created this crazy thing, which, you know, quite a few people have said, did that really happen? And the answer is yes, it did. There was all sorts of other things with that set, which were there in all the reference etchings, because obviously we didn't have photos. There were these images which looked like there were lights on the buildings, but again, no electricity. So how does that work? We did a lot of research, and we went to the London Museum, and we looked and spoke to people there, and we surmised that actually it was reflective discs or baubles on the buildings. So some Christmas decoration supplier was very excited to get the order from us in mid-March for like 5,500 baubles to put on the buildings. So that was, when that was all set up, that was my favorite as well. I think it was just one of those special things that you very rarely get to do.
Like my favorite scene for music. Well, first of all, it's fascinating to hear the process for all of you guys, and yeah, just all this, the amount of work that went into it. And I think it's so interesting for me, since I'm usually doing my part of it somewhat in a vacuum, I guess, you know, relatively speaking. I'm definitely interacting with Kris on a regular basis, but not being able to see firsthand the effort that goes into the project. It's always just a wonderful surprise to see how it all turns out in the filming of it, and then, you know, reacting to that. And with something like this, you know, I remember seeing the first episode and immediately feeling like, okay, I really need to bring my A game, just as far as like what's already gone into this project, and how it looks and feels, and just being able to tell the effort and love that went into it. But as far as like my favorite music scene, it's also in episode 1, that same sequence with the fireworks and everything, that dance when Simon and Daphne agree to you know, go on this journey together. And the reason why it's my favorite is because we recorded the whole score remotely during the pandemic, and you hear these pieces that sound like they're a full orchestra, especially that sequence in particular. And that's like 12 people recording at home separately by themselves.
Wow.
Huge percussion section, and it's one percussionist at home by himself recording all these percussion things.
Wow.
And I think all of that, that's a moment. I remember getting a call from the flautist that plays on all of our stuff. She's the wife of my contractor, Peter Rotter. And so she called me Jerry, and she was in tears because she hadn't played with a full orchestra since the beginning of the pandemic. And she said playing the piece for the end of that first episode made her feel like she was playing in a group again for the first time. And that is just all the musicians, you know, putting that much love and effort into the music when they're recording it by themselves and having to record themselves, when usually they just show up at a studio and perform the music. And so, you know, it was quite an experiment to try to write these bigger pieces and record them all separately. And we had to put so much trust in the musicians and my mixing engineer to make sure that it would all come together in the best way. And I feel like that sequence in particular is one where I even was pleasantly surprised with how it turned out, and feel really proud of it. Yeah.
I would say, I don't know if I have a favorite, but I do absolutely love in each one of the episodes when the entire cast and ton and background players all come together. So whether it's at a ball, a garden party, on promenade, there's many different types of circumstances that we see everyone, inclusive of both families. I just look at it and think it is just, I don't know, it sings in my heart. They just all are so well choreographed together, whether they're dancing or whether they're not dancing. The choreography, the movement of the camera, the movement of the scenes are just, they thrill me. They just thrill me, and it crosses many episodes. And of course, your music, Kris, is beyond, just beyond. I don't think there's anybody better than you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For me, it's with Ellen, but there's one minor character. It's a guy, he's at the Throwbridge Ball, and he kind of epitomizes everything that we were trying to do. He's dressed like a little milkmaid. He's wearing a Mr. Quill corset, and he's wearing the only bonnet in the show. It was like...
For me, I sort of agree with Ellen with, you know, I just loved all those scenes when all the cast are together. But the one most of all is, for me, is the end of episode 3, when Daphne descends the staircase, and, you know, we have this brief that we had to make the whole room gasp, or she had to make the whole room gasp. So we, you know, for me, I had to design something that was different from what we'd seen before with Daphne. You know, this kind of soft tumbling curls. I mean, she looked absolutely exquisite, and you know, all the characters are there. Again, you know, you've got Jack's amazing choreography that starts the scene off, and it was just an amazing end to that episode, and was, I think, my favorite of all those ball scenes. Yeah, for sure.
What was she wearing?
The white.
White.
Okay.
The white.
With the ostrich, with the fan.
Right.
With the fan.
Fan.
Got it.
Well, it was so amazing to hear about all of the hard work that went into it. It definitely shows, and there's, again, a reason why there's such a global fandom of this show. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, and I think we could sit here and ask questions about this show for hours and hours and hours, because there's just so much detail, and it's so exquisitely done. But thank you all so much for taking the time to share all of the great work that you did on the series, and it was so interesting to hear how you work together. And I can speak for, I think, a lot of people when I say we can't wait for season 2. So thank you again, everyone, for taking your time, and thanks for everyone for joining. And
Kris, I'd like to say it's an honor to meet you too. I've never met you, but
yes, no, none of us.
None of us have it. It has been a great honor.
Same here. Thank you.
And thank you for bringing us all together tonight, because it's just nice to see you.
Thank you so very much. What a great panel.
Absolutely. We're all still alive.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
All right,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.